Okay, well, in your stage one, you call it co-creating safety to make it safe to depend, and and that you say has to do with regulating anxiety. Uh, Take us through the hoops there, if you will.
Sure. When patients come to us and they want help, they not only bring themselves, they bring them with them their history of dependency. Has it been safe to depend? And oftentimes when patients come to us wanting our help, they flood with anxiety. So it's really important that we be able to identify and regulate anxiety so that they can feel safe in an anxiety regulating kind of relationship. Because we want to explore feelings and issues and problems with patients, but only as long as their anxiety is regulated. So first step then is checking out where is their anxiety in their body, how is it discharged, are we identifying the anxiety? And once we identify it, can we help the patient regulate their anxiety as a first step to make sure that this is an anxiety regulation therapy so they can feel safe before we explore troublesome issues that might stir up more anxiety. So that's a very important part of it, because oftentimes patients come from backgrounds where people were triggering anxiety rather than regulating it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be a new thing for them to experience the therapist as someone who's paying attention to anxiety and is regulating anxiety as a first step to make sure that it's actually safe to do the work of therapy.
Yeah, and your next stage is stage two, developing the right to depend on someone, declaring a problem to work on.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess some people feel so disempowered, they don't feel like they have the right to come in and have an issue.
Exactly. And just the right to depend, the right to get some help. So when we ask a patient, what's the problem I might want help with, they might come from a background they're not supposed to have problems. Shut up. Don't tell me. I've heard enough about it. So the patient might say, well, I don't have problems. Or the patient may have come from a dismissive background. They say, well, I've got a problem, but it's no big deal. Or they might present a problem, or before they present a problem, they might just change the topics. So in different ways, they've learned I need to regulate my parents by not having a problem. And so they're trying to regulate you as if you need to make sure they don't have a problem. So in this way, we're helping them see the ways they might avoid a problem and bring them back to the problem. You might say, well, that's your thought, but the problem you like help with, well, that would be another topic. But if we come back to your problem, what's the problem you like help with? Well, that's what he thought. But if we come back to you, what's the problem you want help with? So in that way, you identify or block avoidance strategies, but always come back to the problem. And through that process, the patient learns, I don't have to protect you from my problems. I actually could depend on you. So you're really showing the patient they don't have to protect you from the problems. They don't have to protect you from their need to depend on you for help.
Yeah, and then the next stage flows out of that because some people may come with uh, a set of experiences so extreme that they feel that it's not safe to have a mind or a will of their own. So stage three is declaring one's will to work on the problem.
Exactly. I think everyone listening here can well understand that when you think of trauma, right? The abuser says, I don't care about your will. I'm going to do this to you. I'm going to emotionally abuse you, or I'll physically abuse you, or sexually abuse you. I don't care about your will. There's room only for my mind, not your mind. So when the patient comes to you, they may have a very underdeveloped ability to declare what they think, what they want. And so when you ask, and is this something you'd like to work on for your benefit? They may flood with anxiety, or they might immediately say, well, what do you think? They're already getting ready to follow you. And so in that way, you say, well, since this is your therapy, it really needs to be guided by what you think would be best for you. What do you think would be best for you? What do you want us to look at? Well, my father says I should. Well, that may be what he thinks, but in your opinion, what is it you want? And in this way, the patient begins to experience how hard it is to let this therapy be based on her will. And that's why we oftentimes will have to say to the patient, right, since this is really your therapy and it's designed to achieve your goals, it really has to be based on what you want and your desire. And that can be a shock to the patient because she's learned, my experiences is supposed to be based on my dad's desire or my mom's desire. And it's a new thing for her that in therapy, no, really has to be based on her will. This is something that we therapists can forget because oftentimes we can have an agenda. We can think it would be best that the patient did this or explored this, and then the patient would follow your will. And then we'd have the same kind of submissive relationship that she had elsewhere. So in that way, we have to remember that the therapy really has to be guided not by the therapist's will, but by the patient's will, because that is really the engine of treatment.
Yeah, yeah. And then another big issue that you move on to is uh, how to prevent dropouts from treatment. And I know this is something that that beginners, particularly people who are therapists, may suffer from anxiety about. Oh my God, I'm not a good therapist. This person doesn't like me. It's not working. Help.
Right. And so there's certain ways we can prevent dropout if we're making sure that it's the patient who declares the problem, not you. And if we make sure it's the patient's will, not your will. And if we make sure the patient's anxiety is regulated, because if anxiety is not regulated, it just becomes too high for the patient to bear therapy. So if you're making sure it's the patient's problem, patients declared their will, and anxiety is regulated, that's going to make it much easier for a patient to stay in treatment. But there are also other problems that can occur. And so there's a set of studies in the skill building exercises that are really designed to help you see very common problems that where the patient actually is predicting they're going to drop out. So for example, a patient might come to therapy and they're talking about their psychiatrist and say, this psychiatrist is not, he's not giving the medication I want. He's not listening to me. I'm thinking of switching from him to another psychiatrist. That oftentimes symbolizes this. You're not giving me what I want. You're not
Uh-huh.
listening to me. I'm thinking of leaving you so I could be with someone else that listens to me. So if you learn to listen to the symbolic meaning that it might refer to you, then you're picking up, oh, this patient might be getting ready to quit therapy. And then we can say, well, I noticed you're talking about psychiatrist is not giving you what you want, is not listening to you, and you're thinking of leaving. I wonder, is there something that I'm not giving you? If there's something I'm not listening to that's making you thinking of leaving therapy. Because if there's something I'm not hearing, if there's something I'm not listening to, I really want to know about that.
Yeah.
So
So I'm struck by that you're non-defensive.
absolutely.
You're non-judgmental and non-defensive. And those are skills that really have to be learned. They don't necessarily come naturally.
No, but that's where skill building exercises can really, when we have the words and we practice them, right? Because each of the skill building exercises is written in the book, but also each one has an audio exercise. So you can click on a link and then
Ah,
and then you do the skill building exercise with me and I play the patient and then you intervene as a therapist and you are practicing in real time with a patient. And in that way, you're practicing just like you would with a patient. And so in that way, you're literally practicing with me in the audio studies, just like you would when you're learning a language. Like when you do languages, you learn with a language tape. Here, you're learning skills with a recorded audio.
so it's not just a book, but there are
No,
also
right.
ways to go online and have an interactive experience.
That's right. So it's the exercises are printed out, so you could practice them with a partner. They're an audio, so you could just do the audios with me, and each skill has an audio. And then almost every exercise also has a video where I demonstrate with someone how we do the skill building exercises and talk about some of the issues that these exercises are related to. So there are videos you can watch. Every skill building exercise has an audio version. So you can practice it on your own with me, or you can practice it with a partner in a class. So it's really designed, you can practice it on your own. you can use it in class, and there are professors that are now starting to use these in class too, because then students can actually learn clinical skills in class.
Yeah, I wish this had been available when I was a student back in the days of dinosaurs. It would have been very, very useful to
Yeah,
me and my growth and learning. You also got a you raise a point. What do you do when you don't want to practice? I assume that that doesn't mean that you don't want to practice therapy, but that you don't want to do the practice exercises.
that's right. Because people oftentimes forget psychotherapy is something we do. Psychotherapy involves a lot of skills. So these are skill building exercises. They're designed to help you build skills. So it'll be something like where you might ask the patient, "What's the problem you'd like me to help you with?" And in the written section, it shows different avoidance strategies patients say, and then what you could say in response. So you begin to learn, oh, that's what I could say when a patient does that. Oh, that's how I could respond. And then you can have a friend who plays the patient, and then you might read those answers, and then your friend would do it again as a patient, and then you would come up with your own words, see if you're remembering the skill and practicing that skill and building that skill, just like you would practice a skill if you were an athlete or if you were a musician, for example. And so each of these exercises, they're really designed to take you through a whole bunch of patient avoidance strategies or anxiety responses. So you learn how to respond to each of those. So there's like 45 different skills. There's
Wow.
there's usually about 12 different responses for each one. So it really presents you with almost 600 clinical situations
Ooh.
to respond to all of those. So it really gives you such a broad set of skills that it really sets you up where you can, basically be able to get a working alliance with the patient as the first step of therapy.
And you can do this any place in the world, right? You don't
Any
have to
place you
be
want.
where you're located.
No, because you have the book, you can practice it with a partner, right? It's a partner exercise. You can practice it in a class, or you can practice it online just with me anywhere in the world, because the internet's available to everyone. If you got a phone, or use it on your phone or your computer, and then practice these skill building exercises where I would be playing the patient and you'd be learning how to respond to the patient who does these different responses.
Yeah, I'm really struck by your generosity. I mean, this seems like uh, this is like a graduate school uh, experience, really.
It really is. But I think you and I can understand. I mean, when we started out, we learned theory, but we weren't always seeing how theory translated into practice. And I know myself, I kept wondering, what do I do? What do I say?
Exactly.
I had a teacher one day said, "Well, John, you have to realize psychotherapy is an art." Well, I was a classical musician. I was playing with the National Symphony that week. I knew that as a musician, you really need a lot of skills. And I realized, wow, this is a field that is not focused enough on just the practical skills that we need. And so skill building books like this, I think, are really the future. And we see that now in the whole area of deliberate practice. What are skills we can practice in a deliberate way? And of
Yeah.
course, just like anything else, if you're practicing to be a musician, a sculptor, or a football player, it's hard to practice these skills, right? It takes a certain discipline. And so but if you practice like just 15 minutes a day, a half hour a day, pretty soon your skill set improves a great deal. And there's recent research by Clara Hill where it's really showing that if therapists work on specific skill building exercises, yeah, the effectiveness of their work will improve. So it's really a fantastic way to improve, even if you can't afford supervision right now, even if you can't afford to go to class, you could buy a book and develop your skills until that point that you can afford a supervisor or a class.
And if people are trainers themselves or supervising therapists, et cetera, you've even got a teacher's guide for using the exercises in class. So you can give them some guidance for, okay, you're a teacher, here's how you do it.
Exactly. And each skill building exercise, once the students finish it, there's a set of what we would call metacognitive questions that teachers can ask students as a way to help them integrate the new learning that they're getting. So then the teacher has the metacognitive questions that will help students integrate what's going on. So, and then there, as you say, there's a guide at the end of the book to support teachers in how to use skill building exercises in class. Because this is actually new. Most teachers have never used skill building exercises. So there is a certain kind of set of skills and using them in class. So fortunately for teachers who are new to this, new to introducing deliberate practice, then the metacognitive questions at the end of each exercise give you the structure you need in order to help students integrate new knowledge. And the guideline at the end also helps you anticipate typical kinds of problems that happen with skill building and how to handle those problems.
Well, this is really on the cutting edge of psychotherapy training, I would say, because I don't know how long the idea of deliberate practice has been out there, but I'm not sure that it's been out there long enough to really change things across the board with how therapy is taught.
It's true, this kind of deliberate practice or simulation experiential practice is very big in medicine now. They used to have this problem where in July you'd have mortality rates going up in hospitals because you have the new clinicians. And so now in some specialties, students who are going to go onto the unit learn the 6 most important skills in a boot camp. And they learn just 6 skills, and then they come onto the unit. As a result, mortality rates dropped in many specialties. So in medicine, this kind of specific skill building training, simulation-based training, has really begun to revolutionize education in medicine. Now we just have to do the same thing to really, really translate theory into practice so that students are learning the very specific skills they need in the field of therapy. I think that is the new wave in psychotherapy education.
Yeah, I'm convinced that you're right about that. And again, underscoring your generosity, I was struck to see that you take therapists online. You take therapist questions online at www.facebook.com /dynamic psychotherapy.
Yeah, so the therapist will oftentimes contact me with a question about a case, and then I will comment on the case and how we would think about it and how you might consider intervening. Yeah.
Well, that's just great. Well, Jon Frederickson, as I said before at the beginning, I'm so impressed by your work, your generosity, your contributions, and God bless you. And thank you for being my guest on Shrink Wrap Radio.
Well, thank you so much for having me again. It's always a pleasure.